What's up, everybody? I am here with Matt. Matt, pronounce your last name for me.
Weintrub. It's Matt Weintrub.
Weintrub.
Yeah.
All right. It's easy to say. It's hard to pronounce based on the spelling. So I had a conversation with Matt a couple weeks ago. It kind of started off because he wrote a book on a topic that I'm familiar with, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the things that he was talking about were very interesting, and I thought it could be valuable for people to hear. And that's why we're here right now. And he's talking a lot about Vedic sciences and Yeshua. And I guess the first question I have for Matt is there a difference between Yeshua and Jesus? Because that's something that, maybe there's people that have never heard of the name Yeshua. So could you start with, and we can get into, who you are and what you're doing, but that's where I want to start is like, when you say Yeshua, what does that mean?
Yeah, Rob, that's a great question. So Yeshua is Jesus's original name, right? So Yeshua spoke Aramaic. That was the language of the Hebrews at the time. His name at that language level is Yeshua or Yeshua, right? Pronunciation aside. And it's been translated from the Greek version into Jesus. But I just imagine, names are very important. So you hear some scholars refer to him as Yeshua.
Okay. And so you're very interested in this character of history, which is something that not everybody's clear about. Like, what's your stance? What's your perspective on, is Yeshua a historical figure? Is Yeshua and Jesus, is that a metaphor? Like, what's your perspective on the reality of Yeshua?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I want to say the book is not about 100% about Yeshua, right?
Right. We're just talking
The,
about that right now.
but in the lineage, the context of like, how did I get even to this point is that I had to ask myself the question, is there psychedelic evidence in every religion that religion is based on this from experiences I had? And so when you get to Christianity, you got to dive into all of Christianity, which means you got to figure out, was Yeshua real?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the craziest part about this is the average Christian, they can't tell you where Yeshua went from 13 to 30. It's
Right.
called a missing gap in the Bible. As a researcher, I go, that's interesting. No one knows where he went for 15 years. So at the time, I'm tracing his lineage, right, through archaeology and other different things. And then you start understanding a little bit about his life and the things he would have been exposed to at that time in the culture, the Essenes, right? John the Baptist was an Essene. They had these crazy meditative practices, fasting practices in the desert. And he wasn't an Essene, but he was influenced by them. And then you begin to go, I studied with various meditation masters. And one of them is a Jain monk. And he tells me the story about Yeshua. He goes, Jesus was a Jain. And I was like, what are you talking about, Yogi? And he goes, we have the records. He came to study with us. Now, he didn't have any records for me. He just told me that. So I'm like, all right, this is amazing. And it took me years to write this book. So I start doing some research, and I find a document that's referenced in two different books called, what I call the Isha manuscript. There's two versions. Only one is known where it is, and that's at the Hemis Monastery in Ladakh in northern India. And there's two people that have seen this document. One, a Westerner who wrote the book and was discredited by the Catholic Church, and the second was a Swami who went to verify the document and brought a translator, like a lama, to translate. And this document tells about Christ. It describes Christ coming to India to study, all the people he studied with, from 13 to 30. And this was just a part of that entire manuscript and all the stuff they have on him, because they keep detailed records, the Tibetans. They always have since Buddha. You can actually go read discourses that Buddha gave. They're boring. They're like reading a government manuscript, very boring, but like that's how good they were with records even back then. And you see that Yeshua lived and studied with the Buddhists, with the monks in India, the guys who live in the mountains. He studied with the Zoroastrians and the Jains. And they say he left at 30. Well, when did Yeshua begin his ministry?
Right. He comes back from
31.
Right.
So it would have taken him about a year to get back from where he was. And then the other question is, when you look into the history of how he met Mary Magdalene, that's fascinating as well. So, and there may be a tie to Mary Magdalene having met him in the Himalayas and gone back with him, you know, to the West, relatively at the time, Palestine. So that it's just crazy, right? So you fill in that one gap and you start asking more questions. Like, what were they doing over there?
Right. Well, so let's back up a second.
Yeah.
You have a book. It's an ebook right now, and it's an audiobook and a print copy coming soon. Can people purchase this book or get access to it right now?
They can get it for free. So I've made it
Even
free.
better.
Yeah. I would like to keep it free, but apparently now Amazon charges a minimum. So it's like minimum $2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not on Amazon, or is on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. I publish on Amazon, and I'm working on the
And
last
what's
two
it
pieces.
called?
The Psychedelic Origin of Religion.
All right. So then that gets into probably what Jesus was doing from 13 to 30. Is
Yeah.
what I'm gathering from the title. So John the Baptist, the Jains, Jesus, where should we go from here? What's the most interesting? Well, you did say
So
something about
I can give my personal context to like my story that led down the rabbit hole of the book.
Yeah, let's start there of like, what was the intention with this?
So when I was at the peak of my career, I was teaching at UC Berkeley in San Francisco. I had a penthouse apartment. It was sick. Great girlfriend, good friends. And I had just finished a semester teaching. And I just kind of broke down. Like I was crying, and I was just miserable. I was at the peak of my career. We were doing a startup that was selling these boot camps, of which I was running a program around the country, and it was great. It was the coolest professional experience I've ever had, but it just wasn't my purpose, and it was killing my soul. And so I quit basically, and I went to the Amazon and I drank ayahuasca. I learned I was kind of an asshole.
Mhm.
A lot of other things about myself, but I also learned what I could do to help others. So I had a crazy third ceremony, really crazy experience, and this book is a product of that vision.
It's the integration of the experience. You brought it into reality in a way that can help other people.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So
So
this is yeah.
what were you teaching?
I was teaching user experience design.
And then you said you were
Do you know what
doing
that is?
uh yeah, with software, right? So like the user experience, when they come into they use a program or a software, you're optimizing their experience, right?
Correct. So basically, if you use an app and you just are frustrated and yelling at it,
Yeah,
that's what I do. I make that whole thing feel like, oh, that was great. That was nice.
right.
User experience is about making you not think about using things. If you're thinking about
And
using something, it's not
and
well designed.
what else you're doing is you're making it addictive for the user. So
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. We gotta sell pizzas on Domino's app.
you're making sure that
Gotta,
dopamine
gotta
hit
feed the
is
matrix.
coming. Yeah. You're making sure that there's a
That
little bit of uncertainty of what they're going to have when they are in the experience. And then there's a reward.
that though is also a product of a flawed model of consciousness where advertising is affecting information we receive.
You mean that the program is designed to satisfy the advertisers first and foremost?
To give clarity to my comment, I considered your description in my mind like the experience of using a social media app where it's trying to consume all of your attention
Mm-hmm.
so that they can sell you more ads. I
Right.
don't know if you're thinking, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're
Yeah.
you're utilizing psychology to boost the performance of whatever the software is to enhance the user experience. And it can be win-win, but the person who wins the most are the advertisers who are selling the stuff to us. Um,
Yeah.
because that's what pays for everything, right? Because all this software is free for the user. And so they're definitely satisfying us. So speaking of user, user is also another term used for an addict that's addicted to a drug. And you mentioned psychedelics. You wrote a whole book on it. You also put it in coordination with religion or religious origins or spiritual origins. What's, like to a person on the street who's maybe never heard of the difference between psychedelics and drugs, what like how do you, because I wouldn't consider myself a psychedelic expert or one that's even well practiced at it. So how would you, somebody who's done a lot of research on it, knows the history, I'm sure, how would you explain to somebody to give them a little bit more clarity on the difference? Is there a difference? I guess we can start there.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a psychedelic, the way I explain it, a psychedelic is a naturally occurring substance that alters perception. And we know how that works scientifically. Like by altering perception, basically psychedelics shut down your ego and they allow you to reframe an experience. And that allows you to basically eliminate the trauma associated with an experience by changing your perspective. The difference between a drug and a medicine is how you use it or how you abuse
Interesting.
it. So if I eat cake every day, I'm abusing it. If I drink alcohol every day, I'm abusing it. If I smoke weed every day, I'm abusing it relative to the average individual.
So you're actually saying that it's not the substance itself that makes the difference. It's the person using it that determines whether it's harmful or helpful.
Absolutely, because I can tell you the science about the impacts on mental health disorders and psychedelic therapy, but I can also, and I'm sure other people can share, that they know lots of people who drink medicine, but they don't do the integration work. They don't do the shadow work. They don't meditate. They don't have, spiritual disciplines that keep them grounded.
I actually even like how you mentioned cake. right? Because when you
I just had it last night for my birthday.
well, when you initially mentioned cake, I was like, what does he mean? Like cake is bad all the time, but actually it can be a medicine, right? It can add joy, it can add a moment of gratification that you're eating something that tastes good, and that is very medicinal for all the other things we have in life. So I like that you added that, because you also said altered states, and would you agree that there's other ways to receive altered states than the compounds themselves?
Yeah, I prefer meditation. I mean, I walk El Camino Rojo, the red path, as a healer, and we work with all of it. But my favorite part of this path is when we meditate on the mountain. So we
Mhm.
meditate for 4 days, 4 nights, no food, no water in the forest.
And that was
Now, some
after, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please.
I was going to say, and that was after how long of a walk?
So what we do before we go up to the mountain is a sweat lodge. So in case you had any extra water, you just need to sweat it out.
Right.
Yeah. And then when you come down, in case there was any extra water left on the mountain, you sweat it out again.
The dry fasting scenario also comes up in many different religions, right? Where that's where the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert with no food and water. I mean, that all happened also right before Jesus reappears, right? Around 30, 31, he went through that experience. And so, what is it about being in this dry, fasted state where you're not drinking water, you're exhausted? Like, what's there for us? Like,
Yeah. So we know that when you dream, you release DMT, dimethyltryptamine. There's a book, it's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule by Dr. Rick Strassman. And he was like the guy on DMT for a long time. And they made a documentary. So we know that about DMT. We also know DMT is in every living being.
Mhm.
The third point of that is that almost all of these psychedelics, a lot of them operate as DMT in natural form. And the other way to induce DMT, meditation. So if you are in the forest long enough, especially 40 days, you will eventually be tripping balls. And it's not just Yeshua. Like there's a history of Hebrew prophets, Jewish prophets, like Ezra, who go into the desert and do this. And they start seeing stuff. Like Ezra, he's called Ezra the scribe. He would go to the desert, meditate, trip out, and he'd tell his scribes, like, write this stuff down. Amazing.
I like how you said you went up to the mountain for 4 days, right?
This year I did 7.
Okay. I like how a lot of the benefits of what you're talking about, they really do start after 3 days. Like if you quit drinking water and
Yeah.
you're fasted, the first day nothing happens, second day nothing happens. But once you get past, 3, 4 days, your body starts adapting, and it starts to even make its own H2O, and all of these altered states begin. And we're told and we're educated and we're convinced and we're led to believe and we're straight up lied to that if we don't drink water for 3 days, we will die. Yet there's many people that just quit drinking water and are completely fine for 21 days. And you can go see these people on Instagram, on YouTube. I've personally only went 2 days so far, because my wife loves to cook, and it's like she needs me to be eating. At least that's my excuse. But yeah, I find it interesting that it's almost like outlawed. We're it's bred into us not to do this. But you see this as a very healthy practice.
Healthy and essential. So I consider spiritual and mental fitness equal, if not more important than physical fitness. But yeah, I think what people don't understand, I asked an elder, because they Sundance in the peak Texas heat in August. What happens when somebody's dancing and they pass out? And he goes, "Oh, nephew, if you grew up with us, you'd know if you're dancing and you pass out, you're just having a vision. We just prop them right back up. They're okay." And I said, how are y'all doing that in 110-degree heat, dancing 24 hours a day, 4 days straight, no food, no water? And he goes, "Oh, nephew, we learned to breathe through our skin."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Righteous uncle." And so I think, as you were saying, I didn't even know that till recently, that really you can learn to breathe through your skin, which gives you, that enough moisture to keep going. But at the end of the day, this is about mind over matter and understanding a relationship you have with creator, right? Even the faith to like do something that's taxing on the body, to know like God's got me, I'm not gonna die. It's literally that kind of relationship that the indigenous are building. And
Yeah,
it's inspiring. I mean, it's kind of crazy sometimes, but hey, that's sometimes what it takes.
it is wild. Um, yeah, skin breathing, bone breathing. These are all in Taoism and Qigong as well. They breathe through the tips of their fingers and the tips of their toes, and they bring in the prana, spiral it through their body system. And this, according to that philosophy, the little bit that I know about it, well, I was in a small classroom with Montauk Chia while he was teaching this, but he was saying that as we restrict entrance through the normal ways, through our mouth, then it opens up what would be equivalent to pores, what we know of as pores, but I'm sure it's not the same thing, but it opens up the access points to the rest of our body. So yeah, if you're out dancing 110 degrees for many days, then your body's going to turn itself into a vacuum, which is how Montauk Chia was explaining it. It's like a vacuum effect where it's going to start pulling in this multidimensional energy to make up the difference and to fill you up. And I like how you said it was essential, because it's not, yeah, it's like one step beyond, it's a lot of steps beyond healthy. This is needed. So let's get back to the book that you wrote, because congratulations on doing that. I know that takes a lot of commitment and dedication. What I'm interested in is, when you're writing the book, there has to be like the one concept, the first concept that you want the readers or the audience or the users to grasp first. Out of everything that you put in this book, where did you start as the gateway into the rest of the book? What's the gateway in?
Yeah, it's twofold, right? One is that this ayahuasca experience I had changed my life. I sat with psychedelics for years for my depression. And I finally hit a wall. And then ayahuasca showed me how much God loved me. Right. And to add another caveat to this, at 19 years old, I faced up to 10 years in prison because I was healing myself with these magic mushrooms. And that changed my life. The justice system, I got lucky. I had parents that could afford the right attorney, so I didn't go to prison. But I spent, as a youth, I got in trouble for weed. I've spent, since I was 17 years old, I've been in the justice system until I was 23. I peed in front of somebody every month of my life. Got real intimate with my probation officers, you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it was the best thing that happened to me because I was abusing everything, because I was hurt and depressed and couldn't deal with like my own trauma. Right. And then I became kind of pariah in my community as that kid. And then I rebuilt my life, did the best I could, and I got sober and I did everything I was supposed to. And again, I was at the top of the mountain and I was like, there's nothing up here. There's nothing up here. It's a joke. And yeah, like that's influenced my whole life. So when I came back, I was like, everybody deserves to have these experiences, to know God's love, to be able to heal. Like that helped me heal my relationship with my girlfriend. It didn't work out for us, but it let me become open and vulnerable, you know? And she was like asking me to do that and I couldn't, and it destroyed us. And so I guess I owe everything to the medicine, and the way I learned that, I learned how to pray was with the indigenous people. So I have a lot of gratitude for their community and the way they live their life. And so I started Legalized Psychedelic Medicine, a national advocacy and policy organization for psychedelics. And we've built a decentralized network of really awesome organizations all working for this movement to give people the right to heal. And so I guess that book became a perfect storm of the psychedelic movement is raging right now. Like we got a bill passed in the state of Texas, the most conservative place in the country, which is nuts. It was Texas House Bill 1802. And so now there's amazing progress being made in Washington, D.C. Senator Cory Booker, Senator Paul ran across the aisle to introduce a bill on psychedelics. State legislatures left and right are basically looking to make a change, and psychedelics are now fast-tracked by the FDA. Psilocybin and MDMA are fast-tracked as breakthrough medicines. So this is going to change the whole landscape of mental health, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I guess that's kind of my story on the advocacy side. That like kind of anchors this whole thing of like, there's more to mental health than just mental health, spiritual health.
And so when we say spiritual, the name of your book is The Psychedelic Origin of Religion. And so where do we tie in psychedelics with the origin of religion? I have my own understanding, especially since you mentioned already that every living thing has DMT, which means that it's in nature. And, you know, when you start making holy wine and all these drinks, like you're bound to get some of that in there. But where do you like take us on just a outline or a journey of the book and how it relates to the title?
Yeah, so the psychedelic origin of religion traces the roots of almost every culture and religion back to this ritual, a ritual that involves sitting around a sacred fire, saying sacred prayers in whatever language of that culture, and then having a communion with these sacred sacraments. And it's so fascinating. I mean, this goes back almost 80,000 years, if not more. So you go read the oldest book in the world, the Rig Veda. It's over 5,000 years old. Indian culture is amazing. 5,000-year-old book There's 1,000 passages on this thing called Soma, right? And so we can go into that, but that's basically what happened, is that all these cultures are doing these same ceremonies that I'm sitting at around a fire, chanting sacred prayers, drinking sacred sacrament. And that's the uniqueness of all these things throughout every religion, going back at least 15,000 years recorded, but they allude to 80,000 years in India.
And soma is the name of a sacrament, right? Of a drink.
Yeah, and so the question for a long time was, is Soma psychedelic? Because if you read the Rig Veda, you'll have passages where basically it's like we drank Soma and we attained the immortality of the gods, or we saw the gods, or we became the gods. All things that are associated with, in some ways, psychedelic states. And the most interesting part of that is that they eventually found out what Soma was made of, and it was psychedelic. So some archaeological digs were done by Russian researchers where they found trace particles and they traced this back. This is how they also found out with the archaeological research tools with samples, how they found out they were drinking psychedelic wines in Galilee amongst the Jewish peoples, amongst the Christian peoples, the Greeks.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you actually look at how the wine was made and how there's just fungus, if you go back to some of these origin places and there's, DMT containing fungus within the wheat that they, use to make beer or wine, and it's all mixed together, then you get a drink that's going to be as stimulating as just a traditional DMT trip that people are having today. And this was a very guarded secret, right? And then do you get into witchcraft at all in this journey?
No, I just stick to, there is the history, I guess, of witchcraft in why the Inquisition was done. I don't cover that, right? But yeah, I don't cover the witchcraft stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because that was like the common people, the women, utilizing the occult knowledge, utilizing the brews, right? It's like the witch that's making a brew. And it's essentially using what the religious leaders were doing as well, and that's why it was outlawed, according to my
That is
understanding.
that is what I do talk about, is how that is Gnosticism. So the Gnostics were doing this sacred ceremony, sacred sacraments, right? That's why they're the mystical sect and why they've been censored throughout history. Because for 300 years, Christians were like, men and women are ancient, equal, and imperishable. And that was revolutionary. Women were chattel, they were slaves, and they were slaves up until the 1920s, literally. So that was the revolutionary message of Christ. And they killed those people for 300 years until they thought to themselves, what if, instead of continuing to kill all these people who keep growing in awareness, why don't we just take control of this message? And also, why don't we just demonize women to keep them as slaves? And that's how the modern Bible, that's the context in which the modern Bible was built, to maintain the patriarchy. So in the Inquisition, right, later on, the idea of a witch, they were healers.
Mm-hmm.
Those women were healers. And the majority of healers in the world were women. Just like today, the majority of nurses are
Women.
women, right? They are naturally drawn to caretaking. And so that's what the church did. The church wanted their 10% tax, right? The church didn't teach you how to read. They read for you. They told you what to do. They invented the concept of sin so they could absolve you of a sin. They created an industry around prayer, just like we do around, pharma does around medicine. And eventually they couldn't stop people just doing what was natural. Natural medicine, natural fire, sacred prayers. So they had to kill those people. At first, they banned this. Constantinople or Constantine, one of the emperors, they banned these ceremonies. They started the war on drugs 2,000 years ago. Holy Roman Catholic Church, say it with me, holy, not holy, Roman state-sponsored religion, Catholic Church. That's what they invented. So it was a state-controlled religion, and anybody that was actually practicing their original religion was prosecuted. It eventually got so bad that it led to genocide and murder around the world. I mean, Inquisition was genocide.
And so you're saying original religion. Can
Yeah.
you clarify what you mean by that? It's like the religion without a name, like it's the thing that underlies all religions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I truly believe that experience of the divine is the birthright of all children, children of God. I believe that all these ancient cultures were doing that and stewarding that. And that the ancient religion is one of actual practice, which means actual ceremonies around living beings, like the fire is a living being, saying prayers around that fire and communing these sacred medicine plants. So that is the original religion of all peoples. And only the peoples that have forgotten how to do that or don't do it have become corrupted. That's now most of the world. But the indigenous people, they still do it. And they're the only ones who know how to live sustainably with nature because they have a consciousness at a higher vibration.
I mean, you can't argue with that.
It's a fact. And that
I
what they call it is
know.
natural law. It's called natural law.
Natural law,
And
yeah.
the best part about natural law is they say you can't violate natural law. And this is all they say: violate natural law, bad things will come. Maintain natural law, good things will come. It's that simple to understand law of creator. And the first thing is, remember this. People go, oh, what's natural? You made it up, Matt. Or indigenous, they don't really know. Okay, well then answer this. Just refute this in your mind. Natural law states that without clean air, without clean water, without healthy soil, there can be no life. Argue against that.
I mean, yeah, you can't. But then when you actually look at what we're doing
Correct.
to maintain our lifestyle in a non-natural way, we're destroying all three of those things.
Welcome to the Matrix.
Okay, so you have a book, very, very cheap / free to get on Amazon right now, and you've completed that. And so, what else is in the mix for you at as your journey progresses through this life? What other projects, like what's next? Is there a book number 2? What's the plan?
Yeah. There's two things. So personally, this book is really a small chapter in a larger book I call A Science of Religion, or the science of reincarnation. Because what's
Okay.
interesting, Raw, about all these cultures, except for Christianity, which went off the deep end, they all believe in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
As a product of what? Using these psychedelic sacraments. That's what's fascinating.
You mean that the psychedelics gave them access to the gnosis that reincarnation is truth? Is that what you're?
Yes,
That's what
that
I'm
was
hearing.
the main takeaway of the Greeks in their mystery schools, is to attain immortality. The same language is used with the Egyptians. They had the Egyptian Book of the Dead, like they had this crazy awareness of the spirit world. The Tibetan Book of the Dead. All these cultures have books of the dead, how they describe how the soul travels back to the spirit world. It's incredible. And now we have scientific data on it.
And there's people that have come back from death,
Correct.
right? And they've got
Yeah.
their testimonies. And
You mean
that,
like when he's reincarnated, or they have a near-death experience, or is it one and the same?
right. And then we also have, there's people that are born and they have past life memories, and they've even like solved murders. Like the person that was murdered gets reborn, and then as a child can tell how the murder happens. And there's been cases that have been reopened due to a child having a memory of being somebody else who was murdered, and basically solving the case of how this other person got murdered because the new reincarnated version of this person knows the story. It's crazy stuff, and it throws the whole YOLO thing out the window,
You're
right?
right. Maybe not. I think what it throws out, I like the idea of YOLO in terms of just live in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what YOLO represents to me. Like, let's just live in the moment. Because a lot of us live in the future and the past. And I
Right.
don't know if the notion of like that you live another lifetime maybe helps people because maybe they get anxious. They're like, oh, now I got to do my past life homework. They're like, well, there's actually a lot of homework. Yeah, that's true. But there's
Right.
comfort. There's comfort in this process, but this process is described by ancient cultures. And so I guess that's one other way you might want to follow natural law, because inherently reincarnating in the physical realm is challenging, right? It's a challenging experience. And so a lot of people want freedom from that cycle of samsara, as they describe.
I
Who
like the
knows if it's
name.
possible?
I like the very simple name, the science of reincarnation,
Thanks.
because that's what people are really searching for in the West, is the science.
Yeah, you got to speak the language of any culture. In this culture, I call it the church of science. People only worship science.
Right.
But it's like if you want to convince somebody of something, speak their language,
It's the
right? Like
dogma.
if I was speaking in Spanish, you wouldn't understand me
And this is the
unless you
culture that needs the influence. I mean, they
Western culture. Yeah, the Western culture. I hate to say it. It's kind of the problem. Western culture is kind of the problem.
it's it's just the merging of the East and the West. It's like taking what the problems that the West has also developed, like because we're obsessed with war, we've developed a way to manufacture weapons in an efficient way, which means we've developed a pretty stable manufacturing um, machine that can help the world if we had the non-physical knowledge and wisdom and origin of the thoughts of what we produce physically. And I think that this also comes up in a lot of cultures too, as the prophecy of the merging of the masculine, feminine, east and west, the earth and the sky. When these things come together, is going to introduce us to the new age. And I think that there's also issues in the East, right? There's a lot of being obsessed with the non-physical makes you not so worried or not so focused on physical aspects of self. And so you could just be happy being with nothing. And that's almost part of the journey, right? Is to go with lack and to discover who you are with nothing. And I think that the balance will be the merge between the two, in this case, the East and the West. So amazing author, amazing topics. I'd like you to just discuss a little bit about, I know that you have, or you're attaining funding for another project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Ra, I just want to say that was beautiful, what you just said.
Thank you.
And I learned a lot about unity reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
I haven't read
And
it.
it's beautiful. It's dense. I'd suggest reading somebody else's book on it. I can send you some stuff. And
The Magdalene manuscript, I've read some of that.
Megan Watterson, I read her book, probably my favorite so far. So that unity piece, I think, is righteous. I just want to add a tag to that because there's this indigenous prophecy about the eagle Quetzal condor from North and South America, and
I'm
the
glad
idea
you
that they're
picked
going to
that
come.
up.
Yeah. So like the prophecy is basically that the North, brings this technology, this awareness of the future, and the South, and that's the mind, right? The mind develops this technology, and the South has maintained the heart of the fire, the heart of these ceremonies. Where's everybody going to heal? South America.
Mm-hmm.
So South brings that to the North. The North brings their gifts to the South, and there becomes a reunification once again. And the ancient prophecies do say that since there was that cut in the Panama Canal, that
Right.
officially that's what cut off the heartbeat. And that because they call this Turtle Island, the way it's all connected. And maybe, but the prophecy is definitely fascinating.
It's, it's and then if you take into consideration, yeah, it's it's hard to ignore the fundamental truth that exists in these ancient cultures, and it's really easy to write off because there's no proof, even though there is proof. If you actually comprehend and understand it, they're speaking in symbology, like you just said, the eagle and the condor. There's symbolism weaved in that actually makes it even more easy to understand if you understand the symbolism. If you actually understand it, it is still literal at a certain degree. It's only symbolism and metaphor if you don't understand fully what they're referring to. But it sounds like you have a similar journey of me, is that the more that you researched and looked around at everything, you started to witness the threads that connect all of, like, everything together, whether we're talking about different religions or different perspectives of the people in different historical times on earth. Somehow all the stories, all the wisdom, they say things differently, but there's this thread that goes through them all where they're all referring to the same thing at a fundamental level. And I think that's what the integration piece is like, how do we integrate the fundamental teachings of all of these cultures? How do we bring that into our current day-to-day life that we all exist in and we operate in within the matrix? And I feel like that's the practice of life. We get to figure that out without any solid answer of, you know, like, we have free will in the manner.
Free will and conscious choice. So I agree. This is I call a path I walk the path of loving kindness because the medicines taught me that God is love and God loves me. So that is the eternal truth of all these religions. Like the universal basis is love. The most loving way you can be to another human is kind, compassionate. And when we do that, we feel good. And we have the science of kindness. It makes you feel good when you help other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people grasp for meaning in this world. They go for material things like money. They get it. They have no meaning because they're not making any impact. They're just helping the banks make more money, which takes more money from everybody. So you have to become a conscious chooser, right, in the future. And that's what I hope this book inspires people to think about, dream about. And so for me, I owe so much to this medicine and this path. And my version of giving back is I want to help other people find their thing. Like, Ra, you have your thing. It's awesome to watch you do your thing and crush it. But other people, they don't know what that is. Or maybe they're not free yet mentally to figure that out and build that relationship with the universe to do it. And so I want to build the infrastructure that combines the Western care model with indigenous healing. And I want to build a program around health, mental health, to do that. And like that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm building a company called Ojai Wellness, and we want to build psychedelic wellness centers that heal veterans for free, eventually heal the homeless for free on a social good model, and do that in a good way. And I believe that can help create a culture of goodness, that when you're full of love and you're kind, like you're a good person, people want to be around you. and that is what brings me the most joy in the world. So that's what I want to do. And I want to help other people figure out what it is for them. Maybe it's just a better relationship with their partner. Sick. Let's build a safe space where you can do that. I had a conversation today. My friend, she calls me. And I was like, what about couples retreats? Right. And then we provide stuff for the little ones. She was like, she's a real Southern belle. But she was like, oh my God, that's so great. I can finally relax. And it's almost like you need a retreat to have this environment where you can let go. You don't have to worry about the kids and making dinner and doing all this stuff. You can like worry about you, take care of you, and have your partner there to guide you, right? To like be there for you. So I think that's a beautiful thing because we're healing as a community. So the elders have taught me the hurt of one is the hurt of all. So if one person's hurting, we're all feeling it because their medicine's weak. They're not tapped into it. So it's our job as a community to make sure they're okay. That's why, to me, like if you have homeless in your city and you identify as a Christian, well, it's not a Christian city. So get to work.
Yeah, that's a powerful standpoint. And that's a thread that comes up, right? The unity, the law of one. And I feel like that's the direction that we're going, is everyone's going to start realizing this. And as you said, homelessness, people being unhappy. Once, if you imagine that we could feel other people, like if we truly were empathic and if there was no barrier of like my feelings versus their feelings, if we could feel what they feel, that's almost like it's the magic solution to, uh, like everything would change in a matter of like days, probably. If we could feel the pain of others, we would not want them to feel painful. We would be immediately inspired to figure out how to get them to a state of joy so that we feel that state of joy. And I don't think that this is a far-fetched reality. I feel like currently, right now, there are people that are empathic and they are very sensitive to other people and their surroundings. And I think the entire planet is going through, the shift that everybody talks about. And that's the shift, is we get access to, it's no longer going to be about the individual. Yeah, we've done a lot of progress learning how to be individual entities, but that's because we're all part of this integrated mechanism, this integrated being that makes it, we're all cells or selves that make up a larger being, and that being wants to, or is drawn to harmonize all the different aspects of itself. And so we're all going to, at some stage in our evolution, whether it's in the far future or near future, and I think the internet is actually helping this, we can actually start to understand logically how other people are feeling in a way that we couldn't in the past. But I think that it's going to be within our body systems, not a technological knowledge. I think it's going to be an actual tangible feeling state that we're going to be able to feel other people as if they were our bodies. And it's already happening with people on the planet. And I think it's just, I think that's the direction everyone's going to go. It's one of the ways that change happens. It would be a very effective way for change to happen too.
So everything changes from generation to generation. It's called the science of epigenetics. So if your parents are stressed, they can literally pass on intergenerational trauma. So we all have trauma from fighting each other for thousands of years, right? And that's just another superpower of these psychedelics. But that adds up. That adds up. And then you can dissolve all that away into unity and oneness. That is essentially fulfillment of the prophecy. But in my mind, you could also evolve consciousness generation to generation. Right. So people develop more intuitive psychic capabilities to do kind of what you're describing. Right. Because I see and feel that too.
And that gets into all sorts of other sciences, like that is referenced in these other cultures and religions, which is like the cycles of time that,
Yeah.
like the yugas, and how consciousness shifts through tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And then, why that's happening. Is it the earth, going around the galaxy? Is it something else? But yeah, things get really interesting when you start going down these rabbit holes and start asking questions about why is it that these things are referenced in religions? What could be possibly causing this? And the science is there. You can find it. You can find and prove to yourself the reality of what these religions are saying. And I think it's really easy to think that my religion is right and that religion is wrong, because that's just how we're taught in school, that there's one right answer, right? It's multiple choice. There's one right answer. Or there's a sports team and the whole focus on let's find out which team is the best, right? And so the way that our brain processes information is we're looking for that singular answer, as opposed to looking at the holistic system and what is the fact that all of these religions exist tell us. And it's almost like we're taught not to ask that question. And if we can step back and just start asking different questions, we literally have a different conception of life. And it's amazing. It's like the difference between seeing black and white or color. It's like you get another sensation of life. I don't know what to call it. You get like a multidimensional sensation of what this all is and what this all means. Matt, do you have anything else to add? Like, where do people find you?
Yeah. So I'm at Heytrub, HEYTRUB on IG. So you can go there. In my bio is a link to the book on Amazon. You can also search on Amazon, Psychedelic Origin of Religion. Should pop right up. My name is Matthew Weintrub. You can type that in too. I want to address what you said about the yugas. So I met a member of the Dogon tribe. It's a tribe in West Africa. And he was giving a talk at an indigenous conference on Dogon time, or the calendar tribe. See, the Catholic Church came to them too. Gregorian calendar. They tried to instill that on the Dogon people. And they said, why? We have our calendar. They said, well, ours is better. They said, no. We've been using our calendar for 100,000 years. We're good. Thank you.
Right.
And they could never convince them. See, the Dogon tribe has a manuscript in their tribe. I've been told you can't have access as an outsider. The manuscript is 140,000 years old. Okay, the Dogon is a tribe that lives in West Africa. Most people always call them savages. Now, savages are just people that destroy nature, but I digress. So this tribe, they measure time. 1 year for them is 1,141 years. And a decade is 10,000. The only reason I think that's interesting is because the yugas that Ra mentioned are measured in 26,000 year cycles. So our concept of time has become very rudimentary.
It's like everything that we've developed in the West is for us to comprehend it, right? So we've minimalized concepts so that we can make sense of them and test them. And so we've almost watered down or like, yeah, we just watered down concepts like time to a point that we can understand it. Like we can understand time in a 365-day cycle, 24 hours. Like that's all understandable. But when you start talking about hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of years, it gets beyond our ability to perceive it easily. So we just act like it doesn't exist.
Here's the craziest part about all that. The Dogon tribe 2 years ago, the heads of the tribe go, we've seen the stars. It's time for us to go public with our knowledge. Like they've been counting time for 2,000 years, and we're like, yeah, we have to go public with all this knowledge now. Like that is literally how they operate, on a completely different level of consciousness, that we've gone with this short-term type of consciousness. And the product of any short-term thinking is, it seems to be destructive.
Right. Because it's short term. It's like the product of thinking about yourself as well versus thinking about others. The
Well, I
Dogon
think
is interesting. It comes up a lot.
if your natural state or natural law is abundance, if you're naturally infinite, if reincarnation is true, which means energy is neither created nor destroyed, which is a law we teach in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And these tribes like the Dogon, they're so tapped into reincarnation that they know certain souls are like reincarnating in that tribe and they're looking for them.
Right.
Like
That's
that's how in tune they are, like because people go straight to those bodies, that tribe. And yeah, then it's a different ball game. But if you're on a short-term time frame and you're always stressed, if you're stressed, you have cortisol, which shuts down your immune system. Well, then you're in an unnatural state because you're assuming poverty. In a way, that just thought came to me as we were discussing time.
you're focused on what can kill you or what can be adding more stress because your focus is stress, which is how control is had. All you have to do to control people is to stress them out, and then now they're not focused on these natural laws, and they're just focused on fighting and survival.
Do you know how trauma is made?
Tell me, tell us.
Okay, so if I came up to you and I was a really big guy, very aggressive, and I pulled out a knife, you have two options. What are they?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, right? And either way, your body addresses the situation that it's met with in a natural way. An attacker is on you. You're either going to have the energy to escape or the will to defeat them or go down track. But in the case of the modern human, if a child is like at home with their parents or in school, Well, they can't run away from school. And they can't attack their teacher,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a balance. So it's like, what do children do around stressed parents? They internalize trauma. At least that's the thesis of Dr. Gabor Mate. And I think that thesis is very interesting to me in a way that we're kind of captivity animals, the way we live, and our society is based on money. So it's not like you can't really run away from society because it's all based on money. And you can't just have money, you have to earn money. So like the complacency of like this system tied to money kind of is inherently stressful upon the human system.
It induces trauma. Yeah, because
Potentially.
I like that very simple explanation of what causes trauma, what causes us to input trauma into our programming.
That's a very subtle form, right? There's very overt forms. Sexual
Right.
abuse, parent yelling at you, hitting you. But there's also like informal trauma bonds. And maybe that's just a natural consequence of us growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But whether you're in an indigenous culture or Western culture, addiction, traumas, like they're universal.
It's here for us. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, I think we should wrap it up there. Do you have any other closing thoughts that you'd like people to step away with?
I mean, I just think you should support what we're doing if you vibe with it,
And
right?
how do they do that?
Well, follow along with the journey on Instagram, right? I'm gonna put out a link soon. You can just follow along with some of our pages. We have like at Ojai Wellness, and we're gonna be eventually going public with all the materials we've been preparing and an NFT fundraiser we're preparing to do, right, to support this. So that's like my basic like two
Yes.
cents pitch. Yeah. And the overall thing is it's a matter of what is best for our children and our children's children. Right? Why are psychedelics so important to the origin of religion, aside from all the good that they do? Is that when we don't do this, right? The reason I call it essential is that things fall apart. The Western world is falling apart. 1 in 4 individuals have a mental health disorder. Suicide is a public health disorder. It's the 10th leading cause of death in adults. About 30% of veterans in special operations suffer from mental health conditions. It's the second leading cause of death in children. 40% of our kids are sad. Like they're just sad. And no one talks about it. And we've just come to find, so there's a lot to unpack there because I can go on forever. The point is that the way we're living is not sustainable.
I think we can end it there, man. That statement of problems is very real. And the fact is that you're on the journey to provide solutions to those problems that we're facing.
Yes, sir.
And I honor that. And I want to thank you for sharing your message and sharing valuable information. There's a lot of entryways into concepts that I invite everybody to follow. If they are intriguing to you, they will surely start to make sense the more that you become familiar with them. They will definitely start to link important concepts in your mind. Matt has a book that likely will help you put that all together. And there's not that many books on reincarnation. So, really excited for his next book to come out and everything that he's got going on from there as well. So thank you, Matt, for the dialogue. And until next time, everybody, take care.
Peace.